Imagine this scenario for a second. You are a sophomore in high school. It is the very last day of the school year. The sun is out, spirits are high, and you are standing on a baseball field. You've got your glove on, you're ready for the game. And then without any warning at all, the world just goes completely black.
It really sounds like the opening scene of a suspense thriller, doesn't it? But for James Clear, who is the author of the book we're diving into today, this was a terrifying reality. And we're not talking about a simple fainting spell or, a minor blackout. A classmate had actually taken a full-force swing with a baseball bat, lost his grip on the handle, and that bat struck Clear squarely between the eyes.
Yeah, which is just a nightmare scenario. And just to set the stakes here right at the top, because I really think it's important to understand exactly where his whole philosophy comes from. We aren't talking about a mild concussion where you just sit on the bench for a few innings with an ice pack. This was catastrophic damage.
Oh, truly catastrophic. The impact was so severe that his nose was literally shattered into this distorted U-shape. The force caused multiple skull fractures. Both of his eye sockets were broken. I mean, he was airlifted to a specialized hospital. He started having seizures, and the doctors actually had to place him into a medically induced coma just to stabilize his brain.
It is honestly a miracle he survived, let alone recovered to the point he did. But the recovery is actually where the real story begins for us in this deep dive. Because when he woke up, he didn't get that, that cinematic movie montage where he drinks some raw eggs, runs up a flight of stairs, and suddenly he's a star athlete again.
Right, far from it. That's the Hollywood version. But real life is just much messier. When he finally woke up, he couldn't smell. He had this persistent double vision. It took him months just to be cleared to drive a car again. He had to completely relearn basic motor patterns, like just walking in a straight line. It was this humiliating, slow, deeply painful process.
And I think that is exactly why this book, Atomic Habits, resonates with so many millions of people out there. It wasn't written by a guy who was just born successful or had some superhuman genetic advantage from day one. It's written by a guy who had to rebuild his entire life from absolute zero.
Exactly. When he finally got to college, he wasn't the star recruit. He was buried at the very bottom of the roster. So he couldn't rely on raw athletic talent. He had to rely on control. He started focusing on the only tiny things he could actually manage in his daily life. So he went to bed early to get perfect sleep. He kept his dorm room relentlessly tidy. He started lifting weights. Not aggressively, just consistently.
Which, when you say it out loud, these sound like such trivial things like, oh, I kept my room clean, I slept 8 hours. It really doesn't sound like a recipe for a world-class performance.
And that is exactly the trap we all fall into. We dismiss these small changes because they just don't seem to matter in the moment. But if you fast forward 6 years for James Clear, and remember, this is the guy who was in a coma with a shattered face. By the end of his university career, he was selected as the top male athlete at his university, and he was actually named an ESPN academic All-American.
From a coma to an All-American, I mean, that is the literal definition of a turnaround.
Yeah, and that journey from the hospital bed to the record books is the empirical foundation of Atomic Habits. It represents this core realization that success isn't about one defining moment or some massive, heroic display of willpower. It is entirely about the aggregation of tiny marginal gains.
So today we are doing a comprehensive deep dive into Atomic Habits by James Clear. We are going down the rabbit hole. We are going to deconstruct the 4 laws of behavior change, the math of compounding, and the underlying psychology of why we do what we do. We are going to walk through every single chapter, every strategy, and every tool he provides so you can actually apply this to your own life.
And before we jump into the mechanics of all that, we do have a specific mission here today. This deep dive is created specifically for the Simplified Summary YouTube channel. Our whole goal here is to make this high-level knowledge totally accessible to everyone. So as you're listening, if you have an aha moment during this discussion, or if you find a tool that actually helps you change your life, please take a second to subscribe to the channel and share this with a friend who might need it.
Absolutely. We really want to build a habit of learning right here with you. So let's start with the title itself. It's a bit of a play on words, isn't it? Atomic.
It is, yeah. It has this really clever double meaning. On one hand, an atom is a tiny amount of something. It's the single irreducible unit of a larger system, so it represents smallness. But on the other hand, atomic also refers to the source of immense energy and power, like an atomic bomb.
Right. Small but explosive.
Precisely. And a habit is simply a routine or a practice that you perform regularly. It's an automatic response to a specific situation. So when you put those two together, atomic habits are these tiny routines that individually seem totally meaningless. But when they compound over time, they release just immense power.
To really wrap our heads around this power, I think we have to look at one of the most famous case studies Clear brings up in the book, the story of British cycling. Because prior to 2003, British cycling was, well, mediocre's probably being too kind.
Mediocre's very generous. For about 110 years, they were the laughingstock of the professional cycling world. I mean, since 1908, they had won exactly one gold medal at the Olympics. In over a century, no British cyclist had ever won the Tour de France, which is obviously the premier event in the sport.
Yeah.
It was so bad that a top bike manufacturer actually allegedly refused to sell them equipment because they were afraid it would hurt their brand image if other professionals saw the British team using their gear.
That is just brutal. Like, we won't even take your money because you're that bad. So they hire this new performance director, Dave Brailsford, and you'd expect a guy in that position to come in and say, okay, we need to train 5 times harder. We need a massive top-to-bottom overhaul.
But he didn't do that. He came in with this specific philosophy called the aggregation of marginal gains. The whole idea was break down absolutely everything you can think of that goes into riding a bike and then improve each of those little pieces by just 1%.
And this is where the story gets fascinatingly weird to me. They didn't just look at the obvious stuff like aerodynamics or tire weight or training schedules. They looked at literally everything.
Everything. So yeah, they redesigned the bike seats to be slightly more comfortable. They rubbed alcohol on the tires for a tiny bit better grip. But then they went into the lifestyle factors that most professional coaches just completely ignore. They tested different massage gels to see which one led to slightly faster muscle recovery. They hired a surgeon, a literal surgeon, to teach the riders the proper way to wash their hands so they wouldn't catch a cold during competition.
Wait, they taught professional adult athletes how to wash their hands.
They did. Because if you miss even 2 training days due to a mild cold, that is a marginal loss. They even figured out exactly which pillow and mattress led to the absolute best night of sleep for each individual rider, and then they physically brought those specific pillows to the hotels on the road. They even painted the inside of the team transport truck stark white.
Why white? I mean, what does truck paint have to do with racing?
So they could spot tiny bits of dust that might get into the finely tuned bike gears and degrade performance by just a fraction of a percent. Dust that would normally go completely unnoticed in a regular, dark, dirty truck.
See, that borders on obsessive. But obviously the million-dollar question is, did all that hand-washing and truck painting actually translate to winning races?
The results were frankly absurd. 5 years after Brailsford took over at the 2008 Beijing Olympics, the British team didn't just win, they completely dominated. They took 60% of the gold medals available in track cycling. 4 years later in London, they set 9 Olympic records and 7 world records, and that elusive Tour de France. Bradley Wiggins became the first British cyclist to ever win it, and he was immediately followed by Chris Froome, who won it multiple times. In a 10-year span, they won 178 world championships.
From we can't even buy a bike to complete world domination. And it wasn't one magic pill or some secret training technique. It was hundreds of tiny, seemingly insignificant 1% improvements.
Exactly. And that brings us to the math of compounding. We usually talk about compound interest in finance, money making money over decades. But Clear argues that habits are the compound interest of self-improvement.
And the math he lays out is actually pretty startling when you visualize it. If you get just 1% better each day for 1 full year,
you end up 37 times better by the time you're done. Just strictly mathematically. 1.01 to the power of 365 is 37.78.
But the inverse of that is actually really scary.
Right, because if you get 1% worse each day, 0.99 to the power of 365, you decline nearly all the way down to 0. It drives home this fundamental point that time magnifies the margin between success and failure. If you have good habits, time is your best ally. If you have bad habits, time is your worst enemy.
I really love that phrasing. But here's the problem, and I think this is where most people, and definitely myself included, get stuck. We do not see that math happening in real time. If I go to the gym today and sweat for an hour, I am not ripped tomorrow morning. If I skip my coffee and save $10 today, I am not a millionaire by Friday.
Right, and Clear calls this the lagging measure concept. Your outcomes in life are a lagging measure of your habits. So your net worth is a lagging measure of your financial habits. Your physical weight is a lagging measure of your eating habits. Your clutter is a lagging measure of your cleaning habits. You ultimately get what you repeat, but there is always a delay.
And that delay is the absolute killer. We are wired to want the result right now.
And that delay leads to a psychological trap that Clear calls the Plateau of Latent Potential.
Oh, this is the ice cube analogy, right? I found this so incredibly helpful for visualizing why I always seem to quit things right before they work.
It's the perfect visual. So imagine an ice cube sitting on a table in front of you in a freezing cold room. It's 25 degrees Fahrenheit. You start heating the room up very slowly. 26, 27. The ice cube is still just sitting there. You've done the work to heat the room, you've expended energy, but you see absolutely no physical result. 28, 29, 30, 31, still nothing.
And at this point, most people would just say, well, this isn't working. I'm wasting my energy for nothing.
Exactly. They give up.
Yeah.
But then you hit 32 degrees, and the ice suddenly begins to melt. Now, here is the million-dollar question. Was it that one single degree shift from 31 to 32 that caused the melting?
No, it was all the energy you put in before that, from 25 all the way up.
Precisely. But to an outside observer who just walked into the room, it looks like an overnight success. They say, oh wow, look, it just melted at 32 degrees. This is what Clear calls the valley of disappointment. It's that period where you're putting in the work, you're heating up the room, but the ice cube hasn't melted yet. People think their hard work is being wasted, but it's actually just being stored as potential energy.
That reframes patience completely for me. It's not about just sitting and waiting. It's about actively building potential energy. Now, this brings us to a point in the book that I think will definitely ruffle some feathers, because we are constantly told our whole lives to set goals. You know, smart goals, big, hairy, audacious goals, vision boards. But Clear essentially says, forget about goals.
He does. It's a very controversial stance at first glance, but his logic is airtight. He argues that goals are just about the specific results you want to achieve. Systems, on the other hand, are about the daily processes that actually lead to those results.
But surely we need goals just to know where we're going, right? Like a compass.
We do need a direction, but relying on goals as your primary driver has some serious flaws. First, there's a massive issue of survivorship bias. We look at the winners in society, the Olympic gold medalists, the billionaires, the CEOs, and we say, wow, they had this incredibly ambitious goal, so having that goal must be the reason they succeeded. But we completely ignore the millions of people who had the exact same goal but failed.
That is such a great point. Every single political candidate wants to win the election. Every football team wants to win the Super Bowl. If the goal itself was the differentiating factor, they would all win.
Exactly. The goal does not differentiate the winners from the losers. The system they use does. The second major problem is the yo-yo effect. Let's say your big goal is to run a marathon. You train for months, you work incredibly hard, and you cross that finish line. You achieved your goal. That's great. But what happens the very next week?
You probably stop running entirely. You already did the thing.
Right. The motivation is completely gone because it was tied to a finish line you've already crossed. Goals are inherently fleeting. True, long-term thinking is actually goalless thinking. It's about committing to the cycle of continuous improvement rather than a single achievement. The quote that really sums this up, and honestly, if you take one single thing away from this first section of our deep dive, let it be this. Clear says, you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems.
You fall to the level of your systems. Wow. That is powerful. It completely shifts your focus from the destination you want to reach to the vehicle you are using to get there.
It does. And if we want to build a better vehicle, a better system, we have to look much deeper than just changing our surface level actions. We actually have to look at our identity.
Right, because Clear outlines these 3 distinct layers of behavior change.
Yes. Think of it like an onion. The outermost layer is your outcomes. This is what you get, like losing 20 pounds or writing a book. The middle layer is your processes. This is what you do, like going to the gym 3 days a week or writing 1 page a day. But the deep core, the absolute center of the onion, is your identity. This is what you fundamentally believe about yourself.
And most of us approach change from the outside in. We say, I want to be skinny, which is the outcome, so I will force myself to run, which is the process.
Correct. And that requires a lot of friction. But the most effective way to change your habits long-term is to start from the center and work outward. Focus on who you actually wish to become. Clear uses a great example. Consider 2 different people who are both trying to resist a cigarette. When someone offers them a smoke, the first person says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit."
Which sounds like a perfectly reasonable, normal response.
It does sound normal, but look at the underlying belief there. They still deeply believe they are a smoker who is just trying to be something else temporarily. They're hoping their behavior will magically change while they are still carrying around the exact same identity.
Okay, that makes sense. And the second person?
The second person just says, no thanks, I'm not a smoker.
It is such a subtle shift in phrasing, but the implication is huge.
It signals a complete shift in identity. You're
Right.
not a smoker. Creates this powerful internal feedback loop. Your habits shape your identity, and then your new identity shapes your habits. This is why Clear says that every single action you take is basically a vote for the type of person you wish to become.
I really love that voting analogy.
It makes behavior change feel so much more manageable. Because you don't have to be perfect. You don't need a unanimous vote to win an election. You just need a majority of the votes. Every time you sit down and write a page, you are casting a vote for the identity of I am a writer. Every time you go to the gym, you cast a vote for I am an athlete.
So the goal isn't really run a marathon. The actual goal is become a runner.
Precisely. Because once you actually become that person, you don't need to white-knuckle it with willpower anymore. A reader reads, a runner runs. It's just inherently who you are.
All right, so those are the core fundamentals. We understand the immense power of atomic habits, we get the math of compounding, and we know the necessity of that identity shift. Now, let's get into the actual tactical manual, the how-to of it all. Clear breaks this down into 4 laws of behavior change.
Yes, and these 4 laws are built on the classic neurological feedback loop of human behavior, which has 4 steps: cue, craving, response, and reward. The first law targets the very first step, the cue. And the law is simply make it obvious.
And this addresses the fact that so many of our daily habits are entirely unconscious, right? We're just operating on autopilot.
We really are. I mean, we stumble into the kitchen, we open the pantry, and we eat a cookie without even consciously realizing we've made a decision. The Japanese railway system actually has a fascinating method for combating this exact autopilot problem called pointing and calling.
I have seen videos of this online. It looks, honestly, a bit ridiculous to Western eyes.
It does look strange. The train operators literally physically point at different objects and loudly call out their status. So they will point right at the signal light and shout, "Signal is green." They will point at the speedometer panel and yell, "Speed is 80."
Why go through all that theatrical effort?
Because it forcibly raises a non-conscious, automated habit to a conscious level. It forces the brain to actively engage with the present moment. And the data is incredible. It reduces errors by up to 85% and cuts workplace accidents by 30%.
So how do we actually apply pointing and calling to our own messy, normal lives? Do I just stand in my kitchen, point at a donut, and scream, "Donut"?
I mean, ideally, yes. If you are trying to break a bad habit, verbalizing the action out loud helps immensely. Saying, I am about to eat this cookie, but I am not actually hungry and it will cause me to gain weight. It jolts you out of the autopilot trance. But for a more practical general awareness, Clear suggests something called a habit scorecard.
This is essentially just a list, right?
It's a simple, honest inventory. You write down a list of literally everything you do daily. Wake up, check your phone, go to the bathroom, brush teeth, put on coffee, and you just mark each one as positive, negative, or neutral based on your long-term goals. Because you fundamentally cannot change a habit until you are clearly aware you are doing it.
Makes total sense. Once we have that awareness, we can start actively building new cues. And this is where implementation intentions come into play.
Right. Which is a very academic-sounding term for a very simple plan.
Yeah.
A lot of people think they lack motivation. They say, I just can't get motivated to work out. But what they actually lack is clarity. They wake up and vaguely think, well, I hope I exercise today.
And then life happens, the day gets away from them, and they don't do it.
Exactly. An implementation intention forces clarity by following a highly specific formula. I will perform this behavior at this specific time in this specific location.
So instead of I'll work out today, it's I will exercise for 30 minutes at 5 p.m. at the local gym.
Yes. And multiple studies show that writing that down makes you 2 to 3 times more likely to actually execute the habit. You have pre-decided. You don't have to waste precious mental energy at 4:30 p.m. debating with yourself about when or where you're going to do it. The decision is already made.
And you can actually supercharge this concept with something called habit stacking, which I found really clever.
Habit stacking is brilliant because it leverages something called the Diderot effect. You know how you buy one new thing, like a new couch, and suddenly you look around and decide you absolutely hate your old carpet, and then you buy a new carpet, and then suddenly the lamps look wrong.
Oh, yes. One action triggers the next. It's a total chain reaction that drains your wallet.
Right. So we can actually use that natural neurological connectivity for good. The formula for habit stacking is, after my current habit, I will do my new habit.
After I pour my morning cup of coffee, I will meditate for 1 minute.
4, after I take off my work shoes when I get home, I will immediately change into my workout clothes. You're essentially piggybacking a brand new, fragile habit onto a deeply ingrained neural pathway that is already rock solid.
We also have to talk about our physical space here, environment design, because I think we underestimate how much our surroundings dictate our behavior.
It is arguably way more important than willpower. Vision is by far our most powerful human sensory ability. So if you want to drink more water, do not hide the water bottles in the back of the pantry. Place them, already filled, right on your desk, on the kitchen counter, in the living room.
Make the cue obvious.
Exactly. And conversely, if you want to break a bad habit, and this is the core inversion of the first law, you must make it invisible.
So out of sight, out of mind.
Literally. We think people with incredibly high self-control are these disciplined superheroes. But the research shows they just structure their daily lives so they don't actually need to use self-control. They proactively remove the temptation. If you spend too much time mindlessly scrolling on Instagram, leave your phone charging in another room overnight. If you eat too much junk food, just do not buy it at the grocery store.
It's really all about context, and Clear points out that it's actually easier to build a new habit in a totally new environment because you aren't fighting off all those old established cues.
Exactly. If you want to start writing a book, go to a new coffee shop you've never been to. Create a dedicated space where the only context is that new habit.
Okay, so we have successfully made the cue obvious. We know exactly what to do and when to do it. Now we need to actually want to do it. Which brings us to the second law. Make it attractive. This tackles the craving stage of the loop.
And this section is fundamentally all about dopamine. For a long time, we used to think dopamine was just the pleasure chemical, the reward you get after you do the action. But modern neuroscience shows it is actually primarily about desire and motivation.
Right. It's the anticipation that actually drives us to act.
Yes, the highest spike in dopamine happens before the action, the moment you spot the cue. That spike is the actual craving. So to build a reliable habit, we have to artificially manufacture that anticipation. We need to make the habit irresistible.
And a really great practical tool for this is temptation bundling. I absolutely love the story of Ronan Byrne, the engineering student that Clear shares here.
Oh, the genius from Dublin. So Ronan loved watching Netflix, but he knew logically he needed to exercise more. But he was an engineering student, so he literally hacked his stationary bike. He connected the bike to his laptop and wrote a custom program that would only allow Netflix to play on the screen if he was physically cycling at a certain speed.
So if he started to slack off and slow down,
The show would just pause right in the middle of a scene.
that is just brilliant. He successfully bundled something he wanted to do, watching Netflix, with something he needed to do, exercising.
And we can all use a low-tech version of this. The formula is simply, after I do the habit I need, I get to do the habit I want. Or, if possible, doing them simultaneously, like listening to your favorite podcast only when you go for a run.
Now, another huge kind of invisible factor in making things attractive is our social environment. Because humans are fundamentally herd animals, we are deeply, deeply influenced by the people around us.
We really are. Clear outlines that we generally imitate the habits of 3 specific groups: the close, the many, and the powerful.
The close being our immediate family and friends.
Right, the proximity effect. If your best friend starts eating healthy, you probably will too, just by virtue of being around them. Then there's the many, the tribe, the general crowd. We have a deep, ancient biological fear of being an outcast. As the saying goes, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. We would honestly rather be wrong with the crowd than be right all by ourselves.
So how do we actually leverage that tribal instinct to build better habits?
You have to join a culture where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. If you want to get fit, don't just try to do it totally alone in your basement. Join a local running club. Join a CrossFit gym. When you are surrounded by people who work out every day, the behavior suddenly becomes highly attractive. It socially validates that this is what people like us do.
And finally, we imitate the powerful. We copy people with high status because, evolutionary speaking, we want status too.
Exactly. We buy the clothes that successful athletes wear because we subconsciously hope it will produce a piece of their success.
Now, what about the internal mental game? Because sometimes a difficult habit just feels like a heavy chore, no matter how much you try to bundle it with rewards or surround yourself with the right people.
That is where you have to consciously reframe your mindset.
Yeah.
And it comes down to a very simple one-word switch. You have to shift your internal dialogue from, I have to to I get to.
Like, I have to wake up early and make breakfast for the kids.
No, you shift it to I get to provide a healthy meal for my family. You don't have to exercise. You get to build physical strength and endurance. You don't have to write that boring quarterly report. You get to influence your team's strategy.
It sounds super subtle and honestly maybe even a little bit cheesy at first, but it genuinely changes the chemical association in your brain over time.
It absolutely does. It shifts the task from being a heavy burden to being a positive opportunity. And for breaking bad habits, the inversion of the second law is to make it unattractive. You have to aggressively reframe the bad habit to highlight the negative reality.
So not just vaguely saying smoking is bad for me, but really visualizing the yellow teeth, calculating the exact financial cost, smelling the stale smoke on your clothes.
Exactly. Alan Carr's famous method for quitting smoking is basically entirely this. He doesn't tell people to use sheer willpower. He systematically destroys the belief that smoking provides any benefit whatsoever until the habit just looks completely disgusting and useless to the smoker.
Got it. Okay, so we've made things obvious and attractive. Now we are finally at the point of action. The third law, make it easy.
And this is where we really have to confront the critical difference between motion and action. And I will be completely honest with you, I am a chronic repeat offender when it comes to this.
Oh, me too, 100%. I can spend literally weeks researching a new project before I ever do anything real.
Exactly. And that is motion, planning, strategizing, learning, outlining. I'm researching the best keto diet. I'm sketching an outline for the book. It feels incredibly productive. It feels like real work.
But you haven't actually eaten a single salad or written a single sentence of the manuscript.
Exactly. Motion allows us to feel like we are making progress without actually taking on the risk of failure. You can't fail at researching diets. But action is the specific behavior that actually delivers the real-world outcome. Your ultimate goal is to practice the behavior, not just plan it endlessly.
So why do we always get stuck in that safe motion phase?
Because taking real action is hard. It requires a lot of cognitive and physical effort. And human nature dictates that we follow the law of least effort. We naturally, biologically gravitate toward the option that requires the least amount of energy expenditure.
So knowing that, we have to actively reduce the friction associated with our good habits.
Think of it like a garden hose that is bent in the middle. Water's just barely trickling out. You try to crank up the valve of the spigot to force more water through. That is the equivalent of using willpower. Or you can just walk over and unbend the hose. That is reducing friction.
Unbending the hose. I really like that visual. So if my goal is to go to the gym early in the morning, I should have my gym clothes completely laid out the night before.
Yes. Clear calls this resetting the room. You are proactively preparing your physical environment for future use. If you want to eat healthier during the busy work week, chop all your vegetables on Sunday afternoon so they are perfectly ready to just grab and cook on Tuesday evening. You are entirely removing the friction of that chopping step when you're tired and hungry after work.
And this logically leads to what is probably my absolute favorite rule in the entire book, the 2-minute rule.
It is so deceptively simple, but so effective. The rule states, when you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do.
But wait, let me push back on that for a second. If my actual goal is to run a full marathon, that takes hours, way more than 2 minutes. If my habit is just to put on my running shoes and then stop, I am not actually training for a marathon.
That is true, but you fundamentally cannot run a marathon if you don't reliably put on your running shoes every single day. The entire idea here is to master the pure art of showing up. A habit must be firmly established in your routine before it can be improved. As Clear says, you have to standardize before you can optimize.
So read a book is too big. It becomes read one single page.
Exactly. Do 30 minutes of strenuous yoga becomes just take out my yoga mat and unroll it.
Yeah.
Fold the entire mountain of laundry becomes fold one single pair of socks.
It almost feels a little bit like cheating, doesn't it? Like, is folding one tiny sock really a win for the day?
It absolutely is, because it acts as a gateway habit. Once you have already folded one pair of socks, you are already standing there, you're already in the flow. The massive friction of initially starting is completely gone. You'll very likely just keep going and fold the rest. But crucially, even if you stop after one sock, you still showed up. You successfully reinforced that core identity of, I am a tidy person.
And the ultimate highest level way to make things easy is to just completely automate them, right?
Yes, technology is our absolute best friend for this. Setting up automatic savings transfers on payday so you never even see the money, Unsubscribing from all those retail spam emails so you don't have to use willpower to not buy things or use energy to delete them every single day. Buying a really high-quality mattress so you just naturally sleep better without trying. These are one-time choices that pay out massive dividends forever.
Now let's flip it around again. How do we break a deeply ingrained bad habit using the third law? The inversion is, make it difficult.
You basically just add friction back into the system.
Yeah.
If you watch way too much television, physically unplug the TV from the wall after every single use. Take the batteries completely out of the remote control.
I've actually heard of people literally moving the television into a guest room closet after every use.
That is definitely hardcore, but it is wildly effective. Because if you really truly want to watch a specific show, you will go through the effort to get it out and plug it in. But it completely stops the mindless automatic channel surfing. This is all about creating commitment devices choices you make while you are feeling strong in the present that lock in your future behavior. It's exactly like a Ulysses pact.
Okay, we're moving steadily through the entire habit loop. Cue, craving, response. Now we hit the final, crucial step, the reward, which brings us to the fourth law, make it satisfying.
And this law is what creates the neurological bridge to doing the habit again next time. But there's a fascinating biological mismatch we have to deal with here. We evolved as humans in what's called an immediate return environment. You see a lion, you run away, you survive. Instant immediate feedback. You eat a sweet berry, it tastes good, you get instant calories.
But our modern world isn't like that at all. We now live in a delayed return environment. You go to work every day, but you don't get a paycheck for 2 weeks. You save for retirement now, but you don't get to use the money for 40 years.
Exactly. The problem is that our ancient brains still deeply crave that immediate instant reward. The cardinal rule of behavior change states: what is instantly rewarded is repeated. What is instantly punished is avoided. But here is the real kicker for us. We absolutely need immediate satisfaction to lock in a habit. But most good habits only offer delayed rewards.
So how do we sort of hack that? How do we fake an immediate reward for these long-term things?
Clear uses a brilliant story about the introduction of soap in Pakistan. Public health workers desperately wanted to encourage regular hand washing in these neighborhoods to reduce disease. But despite their education efforts, it just wasn't sticking. Why? Because hand washing is a boring chore, and the benefit, which is simply not getting sick 2 weeks from now, is totally invisible and delayed.
Right, there is no immediate payoff.
So they partnered with Procter & Gamble, and they introduced a premium brand of soap. It smelled absolutely amazing. It lathered up really well with lots of thick bubbles. Suddenly, hand washing became a highly pleasurable sensory experience. The immediate reward wasn't health. It was the great smell and the satisfying foam.
Which is the exact same reason basically all toothpaste has that strong mint flavor. It actually doesn't clean your teeth any better than unflavored paste, but that sharp tingle instantly tells your brain it worked and it feels fresh and good.
Exactly. So for your own personal habits, you need to actively layer in a little bit of immediate pleasure. Let's say you're trying to save money for something fun like a new leather jacket.
Yeah.
Every single morning that you successfully skip buying a $5 coffee at Starbucks, you immediately transfer $5 into a specific savings account clearly labeled leather jacket.
So physically watching that specific number tick up right there on your phone becomes the immediate reward.
Precisely. It satisfies the brain's itch for instant gratification.
And this concept naturally brings us to habit tracking, having visual proof of your progress.
Visual tracking is incredibly powerful. Clear mentions the paperclip strategy. There was a young sales guy who kept 2 glass jars on his desk. One jar was filled with exactly 120 paper clips, and the other jar was totally empty. Every single time he made a sales call, he immediately moved one paper clip over to the empty jar. His entire goal for the day wasn't to hit a revenue number, it was just to move all the clips.
It's very tactile. I can imagine it's deeply satisfying to see that second pile grow throughout the day.
Or consider the famous Seinfeld strategy. Comedian Jerry Seinfeld's advice to a young comic was to write at least one joke every single day and then mark a big, bold red X on a physical wall calendar. Eventually, after a few weeks, you get this long chain of red X's, and then your only job is simply, don't break the chain.
That visual streak is such a powerful motivator. You really, really don't want to lose it once it's going. But, and I know this happens to everyone, what if you do break it? Life happens, you get a bad flu, you have to travel for work.
Clear has a very strict but forgiving rule for this exact scenario. Never miss twice.
Yes, I try to use this one all the time now.
Missing one day is just a mistake. It's an accident. But missing twice is the actual start of a brand new bad habit. If you miss a workout because you're sick, don't let it spiral into a lazy month. Just get back to it immediately the very next day. Don't be what he calls a fair weather person. The workouts you manage to do on the really bad, stressful days are actually the most important ones, because those are the ones that maintain your core identity.
And finally, the inversion of the fourth law. How to permanently break a bad habit. Make it unsatisfying.
This is where accountability partners really shine. Knowing someone else is actively watching you adds an immediate, painful social cost to your inaction. We care so deeply about what other people think of us.
Or using something formal, like a habit contract.
Yes, the Brian Harris example in the book is fantastic. He is an entrepreneur who wrote up a highly detailed, formal contract to force himself to lose weight. If he failed to track his food on any given day, he had to immediately pay his trainer $200. If he failed to do a weekly weigh-in, he had to pay his wife $500.
Ouch! That suddenly makes eating an unplanned donut incredibly expensive.
Exactly. It makes the pain of the bad habit immediate, tangible, and public. And that is incredibly effective for our brains.
Okay, so we have deeply covered all four laws. But Clear has a whole section near the end of the book called Advanced Tactics. Because once you have the basics down, how do you go from just being good to being truly great?
This section starts with a pretty hard, unavoidable truth about talent and genetics.
Oh, this is the Michael Phelps versus Hicham El Guerrouj comparison, isn't it?
Right. So Michael Phelps is arguably the greatest Olympic swimmer to ever live. Hicham El Guerrouj is one of the greatest distance runners in history. Now, Phelps is 6'4", but he has this massive long torso and relatively short legs, which is the absolute perfect body type for swimming. El Guerrouj was only 5'9", but he has incredibly long legs and a short torso, perfect for running.
So if you magically switched their sports?
Right. If Phelps tried to become an elite distance runner, his massive torso weight and short legs would just destroy him. And if El Guerrouj tried to swim against Phelps, his lack of upper body leverage would make him wildly inefficient. The key lesson here is, genetics do not eliminate the need for hard work, but they do powerfully clarify exactly what you should be working hard on.
You essentially have to choose the game where the innate odds are heavily in your favor.
Correct. And if you genuinely can't find a game that naturally favors you, you need to create one.
Yeah.
You combine your unique skills until you are playing a game where you have an unfair advantage.
But even when you do find your perfect lane and you build the right habits, how do you actually stay motivated year after year? Because eventually, doing the exact same thing every day, we all get intensely bored.
That is addressed by what he calls the Goldilocks rule. Humans experience peak motivation when they're working on tasks that are balanced right on the very edge of their current abilities. It can't be too hard, because that causes anxiety and you quit. It can't be too easy, because that causes boredom and you quit. It has to be just right.
But even with that perfect balance, eventually a habit just becomes routine. Clear makes this fascinating point that the greatest threat to long-term success isn't actually failure, it is boredom.
That right there is the defining difference between professionals and amateurs. Professionals stick to the schedule, even when it's annoying. Amateurs let life get in the way when the novelty wears off. Anyone can work hard when they feel highly motivated. True mastery comes from doing the rep when the work just isn't exciting at all, when it's just, well, work.
And there's actually a hidden danger in that kind of automated mastery too, right? Because once a habit becomes truly automatic, we completely stop paying attention to our small errors.
Yes, it becomes rote behavior. Clear's formula here is habits plus deliberate practice equals mastery. If you only rely on the habit, you plateau. You need to actively add in periods of reflection and review. You need to occasionally look back and deliberately ask yourself, am I still doing this correctly? How can I tweak this to be 1% better? Otherwise, you just drift.
This has been such an incredible, detailed journey through this book. We have unpacked so much actionable stuff today.
It really is a comprehensive operating manual for human behavior.
As we wrap this up, I want to circle back to the concept of the Sorites paradox that he mentions right in the conclusion.
Ah, yes. The ancient paradox of the heap, it asks. Can one single coin make a person rich? No, obviously not. If you give them a second coin, are they rich? No. But if you keep adding coins, one by one, eventually, undeniable wealth is created.
And it is the exact same mechanism with our habits. Can doing one single push-up permanently change your physical life? No. But push-up after push-up, day after day, month after month, eventually you are completely transformed.
Because there is no final finish line. Success is not a static goal to reach and stop at. It is a dynamic system to continually improve. It's an endless, continuous process. If you ever have trouble remembering to do your habit, make it obvious. If you don't feel like starting, make it attractive. If it's too physically hard, make it easy. And if you don't stick with it long term, make it satisfying.
Round and round the loop, just always looking for that next 1% edge.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and guiding us on this deep dive into atomic habits. It has been an absolute blast.
It really has. Thanks for having me.
And one final quick reminder for you listening. If you found value in this full narration and summary, please subscribe to this Simplified Summary YouTube channel. Share this specific video with a friend who is maybe trying to build some better habits in their own life.
Yeah, your support really helps us keep creating more in-depth content like this.
And before you go, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today. Think about your routine right now. What is the one tiny, seemingly insignificant bad habit you are ignoring today, simply because it doesn't hurt yet, that is quietly compounding against you? Fix that 1% today. Until next time, keep stacking those habits.